What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rant and Review. We are talking today about the unfortunate news coming out of New Japan Pro Wrestling about two of its major events that were scheduled to happen over the next month. Before we get to that, though, of course, this being YouTube, I always like to ask you guys for a little bit of help in getting other people discovering our videos about New Japan and everything else. Just take your fist down there and give a stone cold punch to the like button. Might as well go slap the subscribe button while you're down there and take the notification bell and give it a pile driver and help the YouTube algorithm let other New Japan fans know that we have New Japan videos here for at least for the time being while we still can. So thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate the help. So the big news story that came out at the end of the week, Friday here in the States, we all learned that New Japan Pro Wrestling was going to postpone the Wrestling Grand Slam shows at Yokohama Stadium and at the Tokyo Dome, which were scheduled for the next couple of weeks. And leading into Dominion, which comes up at the beginning of June. And that's a pretty big thing because they've been hyping this up for a while now. Now, I don't know how many tickets they had already sold for this, but I think there may be some benefits and obviously some shortcomings because of this whole situation. The one benefit I can see of it is kind of like last year when they were supposed to have that Madison Square Garden show and it got postponed. Technically, which they're not going to do that show because of the pandemic, but I thought they may have been done a favor there because I don't think they were drawing a lot for that Madison Square Garden show, so it kind of saved them the embarrassment of, hey, we sold it out last time and now there's 4,000 people here this time. So hopefully, I was not unhappy that happened. Now this year might be the same thing, although it's a little bit different this year with these stadium shows, but it'd be the same kind of thing. I don't know how much fanfare there was for these two big stadium shows, if there were going to be a lot of people showing up to them, and I don't even know if they could have a lot of people showing up to them because of the rules in place by the Japanese government. Now, the Japanese government has said that for sporting events, which, you know, this technically counts as a sporting or theater event, obviously, that they wanted to have any of these events going forward be held behind closed doors. I was actually surprised because this announcement came out a couple weeks ago, but New Japan had the rest of the Wrestling Otaku tour. And I was like, oh, I guess it doesn't apply to them, or they're still having shows, so I guess they're still doing it. But now, with a combination of Japan having and being in the state of emergency because there was a severe uptick in COVID cases over the last month or so, and obviously the fact that two New Japan stars just contracted COVID, and we don't know any more about that. It's likely that maybe more than just those two wrestlers got it. And just the general stuff that's going on right now, that it was a wise decision for them to postpone the shows until a later date. When that later date is going to be, if nobody knows, it's going to be hard because the schedule's already kind of crammed. So New Japan's schedule in September and October is where the G1 is going to be again this year because, again, much like last year, the Olympics is supposed to be happening in July and August, which is why they've moved the G1 over the last 2 years. But there's questions about whether or not the Olympics are still going to go on. Now, it seems to be that Japan seems to be bound to determine that they're going to have the Olympics. I mean, if they keep postponing it, it'll be time for the next Olympics by the time they get this put on. And again, this is all because of the recent rise in COVID cases. Now, some people have asked why they were doing these stadium shows anyway. I do think there is a reason for it, though. Typically this time of year, in March they have the New Japan Cup, April they have the Sakura Genesis show, May they have Wrestling Dontaku, if I can get it out, and Dominion comes in June. Now they still have Dominion set for Osaka-jo Hall in June, the big castle show, but they added these two stadium shows. And, you know, it's like, wow, they're doing stadium shows. Now what I think probably is the case here is that normally for those other shows, Dontaku and Sakura Genesis, they would have a sold-out sumo hall. They'd have one of the other sold-out arenas they go to, which generally draw like 8,000 to 10,000 people. Well, if they're not, because of the restrictions and because of the limited capacity, they can only have a couple thousand people at those shows. And remember, New Japan still heavily relies on people buying tickets, a lot more than it is over here in the West, where a lot of the wrestling companies rely on their TV deals. New Japan is still heavily relying on ticket sales. So with having that limited capacity, even though they're getting help from the Japanese government to stay afloat, it does hurt them a little bit. So the idea may have been, hey, we can get these stadiums aren't going to be used, or probably not going to be used as much. Maybe we can get them at a discount, which they may have, and they got a discounted rate to rent the stadiums. And if you have a 40,000 seat stadium, then you can put 5,000 to 10,000 people in there because they need to be socially distanced and meet with the under 50% capacity for those shows. That way they can make the same amount of money, technically, maybe, that they would have made by having a sold-out Osaka Joe Hall, a sold-out Sumo Arena, etc., etc. So I think that's the reason why they were doing those shows, and they kind of moved things around. And you notice that, like, they only had like 60% of their actual active roster, even the guys that are in Japan on the last tour, because I guess they were saving up the whole roster to come and be part of these two big stadium shows. Without that working out now, and the possibility that the Olympics will be taking up most of the major arenas in the country, or at least around Tokyo, over the next couple months in July and August, the G1's already scheduled for September and October. One would wonder when they would actually be able to reschedule these shows this year. I'm not so sure that they could. It might have to be something they do next year. You don't know. The only the only fun saving grace behind all of this is Will Ospreay, the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, who took to Instagram and to Twitter and posted up a video where he was, saying, hey, I understand, it's for the safety of the staff and the fans, but then, like the Grinch that stole Christmas, he got that little grin that just piled up on his face, and then he broke into, it's like he couldn't hold it back. He had to break into full kayfabe Commonwealth Kingpin heel mode and do this and just bust out this whole promo on Okada going to the Japanese government just to get their match postponed at the Tokyo Dome. It's just funny. It's just hilarious to see Will Ospreay do that. Just something about the way he did it just made me laugh. I mean, that's the best you can probably do with this situation, is try to make light of it and, try to. I know it's gotta suck for those guys because they had to take off for 2 or 3 months last year. They came back to empty arena shows. They've been trying very hard to kind of get their feet under them again. Hasn't been going well. The double championship thing is kind of hit or miss for some people, but it felt like at the end of the Dontaku shows that they were getting momentum again, and then boom, we get this. Now, as far as the Dominion show in Osaka Joe Hall, I haven't seen an announcement of whether or not that's canceled yet. I'd have to assume, though, if they are postponing these other shows, that it's not going to be too much longer before that show gets postponed, especially if the rate of infection in Japan doesn't decrease. And there's something to be said about that. I've been keeping an eye on this in the news about what's going on with COVID over in Japan. There's a lot of different stories going around. There was a story about that some city or some town in Japan took its COVID relief money and bought a sculpture of a squid or something. There's another one that they're having trouble getting vaccines over there. It's kind of the same issues with India right now, and they've got this uptick and everything else. So there's a lot of different reasons. I'm not going to get into that because that's not the point of this video, but there's a little shadiness going on right now with why Japan is having such a hard time, given the fact that they have been one of the most responsible countries as far as its government and citizens in dealing with this pandemic, which was why they've been able to have some crowds in attendance for their wrestling shows over the last 9 months. But something seems to be disconnected there as far as them getting the vaccines, and why all of a sudden twice this year they've been hit with these big upticks in COVID cases. So hopefully people, even though they have a very, compared to the United States and a lot of other places, their rates of infection and the rates of death are very low. I do just hope that everybody over there remains safe. Anybody from Japan who watches my New Japan videos, hopefully you guys are staying safe out there. And just, it feels like we're almost at the end of this thing, but it's got to go one last little before we're clear of this. And hopefully within 6 months, New Japan Pro Wrestling can go back to being full-on New Japan. This is purely from a selfish fan perspective, but as I said a couple weeks ago, I didn't realize how important fans were to wrestling until now. And we've done the experiment. It changed my mind. Crowd reactions are a huge part of wrestling. We can still enjoy it without them. But not hearing that Naito, Ibushi, not hearing the crowds gasp the way they do in Japan, not hearing their vocal reactions as we've come to be accustomed to them watching Japanese wrestling over the years. Even just something like having the main event matches where you have the two guys squared off and there's that moment of that pause of silence before the referee rings the bell, and then the bell rings, and as soon as it rings, the crowd erupts, starts clapping and chanting, and they start screaming for the guy that they like, or if they like both guys, the crowd is split between two guys. That's the stuff that you kind of miss. That's all part of New Japan, just as much as signs and weird chants are a part of WWE, and singing Judas is a part of AEW. New Japan, without some of that vocalization from the crowd, it just isn't going to be 100% New Japan, that 100% New Japan Pro Wrestling experience until we get that back. So hopefully Japan gets through this, and, you know, for the sake of me as a fan, that's not the most important thing, but for the sake of us as fans of New Japan, if they get back to their old ways, hopefully by the end of the year. But obviously, more importantly, that the guys who did contract COVID, their staff, their fans over there in the land of the rising sun, hopefully everybody is safe in the long run. But that's it. That's my news here this week for New Japan Pro Wrestling and these big cancellations. I'll be talking about it more. If there isn't any New Japan main roster shows, I may start reviewing some of the NJPW Strong shows. I may review some other stuff. As you guys know, I do a lot of other stuff on this channel besides just wrestling now, so I'm not going to be scarce for content to have on the channel. But again, knowing that a lot of you tune in here for and are subscribed for New Japan news, I am doing a new version of the New Japan Explained series that I did 3 or 4 years ago, and I may go back and do some old reviews of some older New Japan shows that were on my old channel that obviously are not on this channel. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for checking this out. If you guys want to get yourself set up with some free money, you can always check down in the description box below. I always got some free goodies down there. You can get 2 free stocks from Webull. Each of them could be worth up to $1,850. So essentially, it's just free money. So you can use the link down below to sign up. There's a bunch of other free stuff down there. And if you like the video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe button, and share this video on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and wherever you talk about pro wrestling and New Japan. I'll see you guys soon for more news, rumors, and commentary here on the Rantin Review. Have a good day.